Hi everyone, this is Miss S from Excelsior Charter School, and today we're going to be covering Geometry, Lesson 4-1 on congruent figures. So this is the vocab we're going to go over today, and let's go ahead and get started. To start with, it's important to remember that congruent means equal, and that polygons are closed shapes made of line segments that do not intersect. Also, remember that congruent figures have the exact same size and shape. Even if they're flipped around, they're still the same size and shape. Congruent polygons have congruent corresponding parts, or matching sides and angles. One of the ways you can tell is by naming all the congruent parts. So we want to make sure to pay attention to the proper notation when naming the parts. So, for example, what we have here is angle A is congruent to angle D. That's why they come first, A and then D. Angle B is the same as angle E. That's why they come together in the second position there. And angle C is the same as angle F. That's why they happen third. You can also use this to name congruent sides. So, for example, AB is congruent to DE, and notice you have the first two congruent to the first two. We can show that BC is congruent to EF. Notice we have the last two congruent to the last two. Or we could show that AC is congruent to FD, and notice it's the first and the third one on both of those. So while the figures can be helpful, they aren't a requirement. All right, so we move on to Theorem 4-1, which is also known as the third angles theorem. So what this says, it says if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles are also congruent. So basically, if you have two angles congruent between two triangles, you have the third angle as well. So this question here comes off of the practice from 4-1, and it says that triangle LMC is congruent to triangle BJK. And they're asking you to match up all the congruent statements. Well, you can match up your angles. L would be congruent to B. Angle M would be congruent to angle J. And angle C would be congruent to angle K. And I drew those over here on the figure as well for those of us who are more visual learners. You can also match up the segments. So LM here would be congruent to BJ. MC would be congruent to JK. And LC would be congruent to BK. And I put those on the figure as well. And then our last one for today also comes from your practice. It says we have triangle TRK and triangle TUK, and they want to know, it says the two triangles are not congruent because there is no information given for angle K, and they want to know if this is true or false. So to solve this, we need to remember our Theorem 4-1, which says if we have one angle congruent like this, and we have two angles congruent like this, that means that we automatically have the third angle congruent. So even though they didn't give us information on angle K, we know because of Theorem 4-1 that angle K, angle K's are congruent, which makes these triangles definitely congruent because we have all three angles and all three sides. So this would be false. Good luck, everybody. Hope you guys do great.